Liz Truss, well, she was speaking on the BBC yesterday, and it's like a broken record, but just so that everybody understands the broken record, let's just have a quick listen.
So I understand how worried people are, and I understand that people are struggling, and it's very, very difficult times. And this is a global problem. We've got Putin's war in Ukraine, the aftermath of COVID. What is happening around the world is that interest rates are rising. So the Federal Reserve have pushed its interest rates up to 4%. This is a global phenomenon.
So it's a global phenomenon, not phenomenon. She keeps banging the same drum. It's a global phenomenon. It's Putin's fault. It's COVID's fault. It's got nothing whatever to do with Western policies. But of course, one of the policies that was in her mini budget and Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget was the policy to reduce the 45% tax rate to 40%. Unfortunately, that one didn't fly too well. And so Kwasi Kwarteng pushed this out at 7:25 this morning. Let's just zoom in on it so we can see. From supporting British business to lowering the tax burden for the lowest paid, our growth plan sets out a new approach to build a more prosperous economy. That should really make us feel excellent.
Great. It's feel better already, Mike.
Absolutely. However, he said, it's clear that the abolition of the 45p tax rate has become a distraction from our overriding mission to tackle the challenges facing our country. As a result, I'm announcing we are not proceeding with the abolition of the 45p tax rate. We get it and we have listened. This will allow us to focus on delivering the major parts of our growth package. First, our energy price guarantee, which will support households and businesses with their energy bills. Second, cutting taxes to put more money back into the pockets of 30 million hardworking people and grow our economy. Third, driving supply-side reforms, including accelerating major infrastructure projects to get Britain moving. And David, I'm sure you're deeply impressed with that statement.
Well, rule number one, I never trust anyone who says they get it, right? Because that's a sure sign that there's something not functioning. We get it and we have listened. Well, actually, what really happened here is there was backbench rebellion and they couldn't get it through the Commons. So it would have been nice if we'd been honest about that, but hey-oh. And likewise, the comments from Liz Truss, formulaic, yes. Obviously, someone in the spin doctor mode has decided that she's got to show empathy. So she's been given some notes on what empathy looks like, and she's gone off and she's said empathetic things. I don't think that works, right? Because I actually don't think the people who are genuinely frightened really want the leader to say, yeah, I know. Well, it's terrible. I don't actually think that actually calms anyone down. I think what you actually need in those circumstances is something, akin to leadership and maybe courage and maybe honesty. But these are dreams that I can have, but I can't see fulfilled.
Do you think Michael Gove gave some honesty yesterday morning?
Well, I've got a clip from Michael Gove now, as well as not trusting people who get it. One of the things I would suggest we have is that we've got a complex world. Economics is full of moving parts. Geopolitics is very confusing. It's difficult to know how to navigate it. One shortcut to this is find out what Michael Gove thinks and then do the exact opposite. This advice is very good. It's so good, in fact, that sometimes Michael Gove follows it. We have an example.
You're profoundly concerned.
Yes, because there are two things that are problematic, two major things that were problematic with the fiscal event. The first is the sheer risk of using borrowed money to fund tax cuts. That is not conservative. And then the second thing is the decision to cut the 45p rate and indeed at the same time to change the law which governs how bankers are paid in the City of London. Ultimately, at a time when people are suffering, and you're quite right to point out the concerns that people have not just over mortgages but over benefits, when you have additional billions of pounds in play, to have as your principal decision the headline tax move, cutting tax for the wealthiest, that is a display of the wrong values.
It sounds right now, if things carry on as they are, you won't be able to vote for these measures as a Conservative MP.
The good thing, there are many good things in what Liz said, and I do welcome the broader points that she made about
But
growth.
can you vote for it as it stands?
But the critical thing is, Liz has acknowledged that with hindsight, with welcome hindsight, that mistakes were made in the preparation
I notice
for
you're
Friday.
carefully avoiding my question about whether or not you'll vote for this in the House of Commons.
Well, I don't believe it's right.
So there we go. Michael Gove talking about right and wrong. So you've got to be on edge when you hear that. And his point was, well, using borrowed money to fund tax cuts is not Conservative. Now, the Conservatives have been using borrowed money to fund everything for 2 years now. So it's interesting that it's the tax cuts that get it. Now, there is an issue here because there is such a thing as a Laffer curve. And for those who don't know what it is, we've got a little diagram here. And what it shows is that beyond a certain point of maximum revenue, the more you increase tax rates, you get less money in. And in fact, the point of maximising growth is to have much less tax. So if the Conservatives were actually genuinely going for growth, tax cutting is what they should be doing. They should also be cutting the size of the state, right? And maybe more on that shortly. Now, we have here some tweets from an account called Cut My Tax UK, people after my own heart. And they've illustrated, I've picked out just a few examples here of historical cases where cutting the tax increased the revenue. So we've got 1920s America. The tax rate for the highest earners was reduced from 71% to 25%. But the share of the tax paid by those earning the highest levels went almost doubled from 28% to 51% as the tax rates come down. In Canada, 1981, the tax was cut from 45% to 29% in 1990. The tax receipts paid by the top 10% of taxpayers went up from 29% in 91 to 45% in 92. And in Britain, the same thing happened. They cut taxes in the late 80s from 60 to 40. And that had come down from 82, I think it was, under Labour before. And the amount that the highest earners were paying went up massively, so much so that 1% of earners were paying 21% of the total tax bill. And we see that they summarise, all the evidence suggests that cuts in tax from 45% to 40% would increase tax revenue. Now, it's very interesting that the Conservatives never even tried to make that point. It's not about funding the state. It's about political control and political favours and political power. There was no suggestion, at no point did Liz Truss or Kwasi Kwarteng actually try and argue their position. It was just a political calculation and it was jettisoned. And if it was right for the country, well, it was jettisoned anyway because it's not politically convenient. And that's unfortunately what we're up against.
But Michael Gove has been publishing things in the past, particularly about the privilege of being in public service.
Yes, very quickly. This is also from the organisation that Mr. Blair was recently speaking at. And the point I want to make here, who was Michael Gove? He was talking about the privilege of public service. What did he start with? Italian Marxist thinker Antonio Gramsci. He defined our times. The crisis consists precisely of the fact that the inherited is dying and the new cannot be born. In the interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. And Mr. Gove went on to expand on this, eventually saying our age is not the 1930s, but it's an age of morbid symptoms. The model that the current generation of political leaders inherited has been crumbling. This was 3 years ago, and it was essentially the same speech that Tony Blair made only this summer, that they don't know what to do, that their power base and ability to achieve anything is crumbling, and they don't know what to do about it. But the key point here is this alleged Conservative was quoting Gramsci, the cultural Marxist, who advocated a long march through the institutions for a Marxist takeover of the West. It was a very strange choice by Mr. Gove and illustrates perhaps where his influences really are.
David, perhaps we should remember, having had Blair on screen, that Mr. Prescott at the time, Deputy Prime Minister, was in fact a declared Maoist. So we really do need to look deeply at the people who are in power.
Now let's bring this on screen. This is from the World Economic Forum. This tweet, of course, no longer exists because it got a bit controversial, and I believe the article that's linked to it doesn't exist anymore as well. But this was the World Economic Forum